Welcome to Beyond the Nudge, the podcast for women over 50 who are ready to grow joyfully, take action with ease, and fully step into their age of empowerment. I'm your host, Kia Eileen, and this is your invitation to go beyond the whispers of intuition, dive deeply into your potential, and create the life and impact you've always dreamed of. Expect monthly themes, transformative insights, powerful frameworks, and practical tools to help you reconnect with your purpose, overcome challenges, and align with your most radiant self. So here's what's in store: practical wisdom, actionable tools, and frameworks from spirituality, psychology, and metaphysics to help you grow. Inspiring stories from me and from others who transform their lives and embrace their full selves. And empowered action to help you move from dreaming to doing with clarity and confidence. This is more than just a podcast. It's a space for transformation, empowerment, and connection. If you're ready to move beyond the nudge of intuition and into your fullest expression, you are in the right place. So let's get started. Your best you is waiting beyond the nudge. So, welcome to episode 13. If you know me personally, you know that 13 is my favorite number. I even have it tattooed on my wrist. So, welcome to episode 13, titled You Are More Than Your Wounds. You are more than your wounds, or the path to embodied self worth. So, this is Self Worth Month in our monthly themes of our year of empowerment. And I wanted to look at self-worth and worth wounds, because worth wounds are some of the things that might get in our way of fully stepping into our power. So first, let's talk about self-worth. So what does self-worth mean? What does self-worth mean to you? Does it mean that you give yourself more time? You give yourself rest? You have good boundaries and good relationships? What does self-worth mean? Quite often, um, the people that I work with and even part of my own journey was really about understanding my version of self-worth and what my worth really was for me. And so self-worth to me means I have inherent value just because I am, just because I am. It's part of my being. So I don't have to do anything in order to be worthy. Because so many of us think that worthiness is connected to the doing. And that was definitely a part of my story. So self-worth to me also means that I'm already complete. I don't need anything else to complete me. I'm accepting of every part of me, including all of the flaws. And so that is a part of my wholeness, accepting all of that. So I'm holding myself with great compassion, knowing that, I make mistakes. I make great decisions and sometimes I make mistakes, but I am not a mistake and I am not defined by my experiences or my mistakes or my decisions. I'm worthy in spite of all of that. And so I know that I'm worthy just because I am. And so I'm not connecting my worthiness to some external parameters or definitions. And I think a lot of times in our society, we sometimes do look at those external things in order to decide if you're worthy. And so I've done a lot of work and I work with clients quite a lot to kind of help them step out of that story. I am not worthy, I'm not good enough, whatever all of those stories are. So I'm worthy just because I am. And so many of us have worth wounds, what I would call worth wounds. And so many of us don't know that we're worthy. And then we get to our 50s and we say, "Ugh, I'm tired. I'm tired of this. I'm not. And I've had enough. So enough of the old stories, enough of shrinking, enough of playing small, enough of overgiving in order to feel worthy, enough of thinking that someone else's needs are going to be more important than, our own. Thinking someone else's voice is should be heard and not our own. Thinking that we need to do more and more and more and give more and more and more in order to feel worthy of receiving, or enough of not receiving at all, right? These are all part of worth wounds. Enough of being in relationships where we are not seen and heard and valued equally, and enough of just not feeling enough. We get to our 50s and we say, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm getting off this ride. And I know that there is a better way to be. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, how we get back to that being space and out of the proving and doing space. And a lot of that doing space comes from our worth wounds. And so, what are our worth wounds? Well, I mean, they can come from a number of different places. Normally, our worth wounds, those experiences that somehow tell us that, we're not quite enough, we're not good enough, we're not lovable, we're not likable, we're not attractive, we're not desirable, whatever the story is, we're not intelligent enough, we're not, right? Can come from a number of different places, experiences that we have in our lives. And we develop a belief. Something happens, and then we believe something about ourselves or the world to make it make sense. And so we internalize what has happened as something that we've done wrong or somehow where we are lacking. We don't say, that thing just happened. Okay, it's just a thing that happened. Doesn't mean anything about me. Something happens, and we say, it must have somehow been something about me that caused that to happen. Somehow I must have been lacking. Somehow I've got a shortcoming. Somehow, I'm not enough. Because if I was enough, that person would love me. Instead of saying, maybe somewhere inside that person doesn't love or accept or have compassion for themselves. And that's why they did that thing to me or said that thing to me. We internalize it because we think that is the thing that we can control, right? So this is ultimately about how we try to control the situation by turning it on ourselves. And so, we begin to say, well, it must be me. It must be me. It must be my fault. And so, isn't it wonderful to be able to acknowledge that and say, well, maybe it's not me. Maybe it's not me. Maybe I am defining myself by a standard that they're not holding themselves to. And so you can begin to rewrite the story. Maybe there we have been, it's a result of conditioning, right? We've been susceptible to conditioning that we need to prove our worth. And we've been in this cycle of proving our worth for decades. Maybe it's linked to beauty, maybe it's linked to youth or intelligence or accomplishments. And we say, well, I need to do more. And maybe it's because, this conditioning means that, especially as women, our worth comes from how well we serve, how big we serve, how much we do, how much we serve others, how much we sacrifice our own needs, our own desires, our own wants, our own voices in order to be loved and accepted. Maybe we are so used to being perfect or aiming for perfection that we feel that we're always coming up short somehow. And so we continue to do, to uphold this vision of perfection, all of this conditioning layering on top of itself, making us feel smaller and smaller and smaller. It's this never-ending cycle of measuring up. And so we chase the doing more in order to be better, the doing more in order to be better, the doing more in order to be better until we're overwhelmed and we're tired. And so these are patterns of behavior that we've adopted in order to prove our worth. But these patterns are not our truth. These patterns are just adapted behaviors that we've been using in order to gain love and acceptance. It's not who we are, and it's not permanent. Things happen in our lives, in our relationships, maybe in our families or in our first, education experiences in schools. Maybe there was bullying. Maybe you got into high school and you didn't feel you were attractive enough or popular enough or smart enough. And so these things happen and you develop this way of thinking about yourself or the world, but you exist because you are the thing that is lasting, not these things that have happened to you. Those are experiences, but this isn't you, the truth of who you are. And once you strip away all the conditioning, the what happened to me, you begin to see that you are still there in spite of everything. So a worth wound steeped in conditioning can be released. And then you can find yourself in the midst of all of that and begin to ask those important questions without the conditioning, without the story, without the beliefs and the decisions that I've made about myself and the world. Who am I now? Who am I truly? And another worth wound is, maybe you spent your life feeling invisible, right? Or, playing small and, keeping yourself um, sort of good and um, acceptable. And then this gets amplified in midlife as beauty changes, as body changes, as mind changes, hair. Why are gray hairs so wiry? I mean, somebody tell me that. Somebody answer that question for me. But things change, and you begin to feel like you're fading more and more into the background. And maybe the societal messaging, if we look around, our world, is that as we age, we get past it and, we're irrelevant, or, who wants to, hear them or see them? Um, and so we get burdened by this projection of perfection. It's an impossible standard of perfection that honestly, doesn't truly exist. We're chasing something that is impossible because the nature of life is that everything changes always. It's always changing. And isn't it beautiful? Isn't it marvelous? Isn't it wonderful that we get to still be here and change and evolve into something magnificent? We get to take all of our life experiences and pull them into this moment and say, I've lived through some things, I've survived some things. And this is who I get to be now. My choice, my decision. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful? And so, if we accept that things change and we change, and we say, I'm changing for the better, I'm always changing for the better, we get to position ourselves into a space of positivity and empowerment and enjoy and honor this stage of our lives. So we get past being invisible to ourselves so we can become visible to ourselves and then visible to the world, releasing all those societal expectations. Or maybe your worth wound is around roles, and the roles that maybe you adopted, throughout life. Were you a certain kind of daughter or sibling? Were you a certain kind of child? Were you a certain kind of student? Were you a certain kind of partner? A certain kind of mother? Did you fulfill a certain role in your career? Have a certain, voice? Maybe you're a caretaker. Maybe you're an advocate in your family or in your friendship dynamics. Maybe you're the one who does things, who gets things started. What are the roles? And are they roles that you decided, or were they roles that were decided for you? Maybe part of the roles is, part of the roles where I'll be good, I'll be quiet, I'll be, I won't be any trouble, I won't make a fuss, I'll be selfless. No, you first. It's okay. And we become attached to being celebrated by how much we conform and bend to the will of others. I can remember being in grade school. Maybe I was maybe in the second grade, and my parents love them dearly. They're still together, more than 55 years married, and they're still together. But they used to argue a lot. And I didn't understand that, it was just how they sort of communicated in this very heated way, but it always sounded so horrendous to me. So I think I decided that I would be, I wouldn't cause any trouble. I wouldn't make any fuss. I'd be the good girl. I'd get good grades. I'd be quiet. And they kind of never saw that because I made sure that I was a little bit sort of invisible, no trouble here. And I can remember being in this sort of second grade, maybe the third grade, and I handed in my homework, and the teacher collected it. And as she was going by me, she turned around and looked at me, and I'll never forget it because it was such a pivotal moment in my understanding of how I needed to be in the world. And she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "You are so good." And I was like, wow, she sees me. I am good, which meant doing all my work, being quiet, never causing any trouble. And that became part of my coping strategy, which meant that I had to always bend myself to this story of being good. And it took years of work to liberate myself from this kind of cage of I must not cause any trouble or go against the grain. And, how many of you have a similar story of what you've decided about how you need to be in the world or the role you needed to adapt? And when I rebelled many years later, I call myself the sort of oldest runaway. When I moved to the UK in my early 30s, it felt like a deep act of rebellion because I was going against what everyone else wanted, but it was my act of liberation. And so, is it time for your act of liberation? Or have you already had an act of liberation outside of these roles to begin to define yourself? Because when we decide that we will no longer bend to the will of others, we have to face the fact that maybe sometimes we break something. Maybe we break a relationship, or maybe we break a career, or, maybe we break a friendship. But in that breaking, you emerge, the fullness of you emerges. So, what happens when you stop bending? When you stop bending to the will of others? And can you become in that space the embodiment of power, pleasure, and purpose for yourself and no one else? Can you liberate yourself from these roles? That's our invitation today. Or maybe your worth wound is based in placing value inside of the expectation of others, not for yourself, but for others, where you are maybe waiting to be chosen, waiting to be valued, waiting to be told that you are good enough, that you've done enough, that you're intelligent enough, beautiful enough, thin enough, curvy enough, whatever it might be that you're waiting for, you're still waiting. Maybe that's part of your wound that you're still waiting. And so you continue to try to be something that someone else is expecting. Who is that? How old is that story? How long have you been carrying it? Begin to ask yourself these questions. Because when you're waiting to be chosen, you're actually waiting for someone to give you permission to be. But sometimes we're waiting for permission from someone who has no idea who they are either. So we're all kind of stumbling around in other people's expectations instead of defining our own value and our own worth for ourselves, seeing ourselves, loving ourselves, listening to ourselves and our own voices and our own truth. We choke our expression down, waiting for permission. And so, can you give permission to yourself? What if you gave yourself permission today, right now, in this moment, to be seen, to be fully heard, to give yourself permission to thrive and to flourish, irrespective of what anyone else thinks, says, or does? What if you gave yourself permission to choose yourself, to value yourself, to love yourself wholly for all that you are? If you told yourself that you were already worthy simply because you are here in this time, in this body, a living, walking miracle because you are. What if you gave yourself permission to say, enough, and I've had enough of the not enough, right? What if you gave yourself permission to be all of you, to be fully expressed, to be your truth? What if your worthiness became unconditional? You woke up every morning and you said, I am worthy. Full stop. End of story. Period. That's it. I'm worthy. And you yawn, you stretch, and you jump out of bed, knowing that it's non negotiable. What would your relationships look like? What would your career look like? How would your voice sound? How would you hold yourself if your worthiness was non negotiable? If it was a hard, cold fact, didn't matter what anyone else thought, and you were living your life from this space. Breathe into that and imagine that for a moment, that your worthiness is non negotiable. I am always worthy. What would that feel like? If you just decided, last week we were talking about making that decision. So decide, if you just decided that this is how you were going to be, this is how you were going to live, this is how you were going to breathe and move and speak, what would change in your life? I bet quite a few things. And to help us get to that point, I love a framework. So I want to share with you a framework and a way of sort of processing these wounds. First you can begin to ask yourself, well, where in my life am I not thriving? Where am I in my life? Am I just living a half life? Or am I using half my voice? Or am I shrinking away? And, I work with all kinds of women, and a lot of, you know, successful, successful on paper women who seemingly have it all, but underneath have this story going on, this worthiness challenge, this worthiness lie at the end of the day. So asking yourself, doing a sort of stock take of your life, having a look around in all areas of your life and say, where am I not thriving? And am I telling myself about my worthiness not to have that, not to receive that? And so you can use this process like looking at that area of your life and then asking yourself these important questions. We're using this framework, and it's called the worth framework. And we want to shift these worth wounds and allow you to step into the fullness of who you are, your embodied self worth. So, W, you need to witness it, right? You need to acknowledge it. What is the worth wound? You know, if you look at an area that you're not thriving in, what is it? Call it out. You know, I feel um, not good enough. I feel not lovable. I feel not smart enough. My voice is irrelevant. Ooh, that was a huge one for me. My voice is not irrelevant. No one wants to hear what I have to say. It's not important. You might hear my dog stretching in the background. Sorry about that. That was a big one for me that I had to overcome. And so witness it, name it, bring it into the light. Everything in the universe needs and wants acknowledgement. And in order to heal, we need to acknowledge what needs to be healed. So where are you not thriving? And what is the wound that's connected to that? How long have you felt that way? What's the first time you felt that way? Where does it come from? I think a lot of my story, came from, wanting to be good and quiet to make things easier at home. And so, yes, bring it into the light so that it can be acknowledged and healed is that first important step. So witness it, name it. And then own your story. So if you can trace the root back to this belief, what is it connected to? What happened? What is the thing that happened? And can you just own it? It's a part of you. It's a part of your story. It's a part of the thing that has shaped you over time. And so, can you ask yourself, based on that experience, what is the story that I've been telling myself that has been holding me back? So, this thing happened, and I've developed a story as a result of that. So, what is the story that you've been telling yourself? And if the story that I have is that I'm not good enough, then what is the truth of that? Well, the truth of that is that that's not true, right? I am good enough. And so, where is my truth in that? So, if I accept that if I am good enough, then maybe the truth is that, I have desires and talents and abilities that I am silencing, parts of me that I am keeping quiet, parts of me that I am hiding because I'm trying to keep up the lie that I'm not good enough. Does this make sense? So, where is the truth? Where am I silencing the truth within myself? Because if I'm believing this lie that I'm not good enough, then I'm limiting myself. So, where is the truth that I am hiding, that I am silencing? And what is the new story that I can begin to tell myself? Okay, so I am good enough. I am talented in this. I am a good writer or dancer or, creator or AI engineer, whatever it is, I am good enough for that. I am lovable. I am talented. I am enough. I am. Can we begin to sink into that space? Um, and can you say to yourself, I am not the wound. I am not the thing that happened to me. I am the force that exists in spite of it. I am the force that survived what happened to emerge into the fullness of who I am. I'm the force. I'm not the experience. And so, are reframing the narrative. So, as a result of what happened, these experiences, what were the lessons that I learned? What are the gifts and abilities that I have now honed over time because of the thing that happened? What are my strengths? Can I see my life as the university of life and see those experiences as a training, almost a sacred training, in order to step forward in this time of your life, our lives, as this fully formed thing that attended the university of life? Sacred training, sacred lessons that you can now use to fully embody who you have been becoming, who you are now. And can you say to yourself, because of this thing that happened, I learned. Because of this thing that happened, I became. Because of all of this, I now am. Becomes a different experience. Instead of, well, this happened to me and now I can't. This happened to me and now I am, can become your new battle cry. So then you can begin to really immerse yourself in the tea of this framework, which is thanking yourself, expressing so much gratitude for your experiences, who you are, and how you survived, and how you are now thriving. Because I bet in many, many areas of your life, you are, if you really recognize and acknowledge yourself. So, really thanking yourself for being here, for still putting one foot in front of the other every single day, in spite of some of these beliefs. Thanking yourself for being enough, for being a survivor, for being a healer, for being worthy, for being love. Thanking yourself for being here, so that you can honor your wholeness, honoring everything that you are with compassion, releasing judgment and any of the not enoughs, being able to look yourself in the mirror, looking deeply into your own eyes, saying, I see you, I love you, I honor you, I celebrate you for getting me here to this moment. And when you look at yourself deep in the eyes with compassion, seeing all of you, you have no choice but to see that you are worthy. It's what I see when I look at you. So I'm just hoping that when you look at yourself, you see the same thing too. Because here's what's happened. Here's what happens when we really begin to see ourselves in our wholeness and in our worthiness. We stop shrinking. We stop shrinking. We're not afraid of being seen. We're not afraid of being heard. We're not afraid to no longer bend. We stand up straight and we hold ourselves, knowing who we are in our full worthiness. We become embodied in that understanding. So we break free from this cycle where we have to prove our worthiness by doing. We stop the doing and we flow in our being. And that's a different energy. That is an energy of grace and of peace and of ease, no pushing or pulling, There's just flow. And so no more hustling or seeking validation because you can validate yourself. You can honor yourself and love yourself. You give yourself time and space to rest. You set clear boundaries where no becomes a full sentence. No explanation needed, just no. And my favorite expression, especially with boundaries, is I love you, but no. Said with a smile, and then that's it. Because we're breaking free from those cycles of proving in order to gain worth. You value peace over performance. Peace over performance. I no longer desire to perform for anyone. My peace is non-negotiable. My rest is non-negotiable. Breaking free of those cycles where your definition of wholeness of who you are is your default setting. No one else can shift that. No one else can define you for you when you release those wounds. And as a result, you transform the relationships around you because you are standing in a different energy. People will relate to you in a different energy. And when you are, I don't maybe use the word demanding, but when you are calling in a different kind of energy, because when you're in a different energy, then those relationships have to shift as well. So when you are standing in the energy of empowerment, you empower those relationships to form in a different way. So everyone is gaining from this as well. Those relationships and the love that you give and receive becomes reciprocal, because here's the thing. When you are standing in this worthy energy, you allow yourself to receive. You know you're worthy of receiving, not because of what you do, but just because you are. So the relationships become more fulfilling. You reclaim your voice, your vision, and your vitality when you know that you are worthy. You live less from your head and more from your heart and soul. You really link into your purpose. Your purpose becomes aligned with your heart, and you begin to thrive and not just survive, because the energy of peace and reciprocity wants thriving for you, not just surviving. And you experience what I love to call inner liberation. You free yourself from the inside out, where you stand and step into this space where you're just you, unapologetically. You are just you, whatever that looks like. And you hold yourself with compassion and joy, and your wounds no longer define you. And you love yourself wholly, completely, in spite of whatever shortcomings you used to think defined you. And as a result, everything around you changes and the world changes. Can you imagine a sea of embodied women in worthiness? What would that look like if their definitions of who they are were defined completely by this state of inner liberation? I can guarantee you the world would be different. And this is what we're aiming for with this podcast, with the Build Foundation, with all of my work, is a sea of embodied women that change the world. Oh, that's what I feel, and that's what I'm working toward. And hopefully you are a part of this journey as well. Because when the world changes, younger generations begin to see and experience what graceful and empowered aging looks like. And then they're not afraid of the aging process. And so then they can step out of this, like, I need to be this kind of thing, and I need to be this kind of person who gets older. They're shedding all of that, and they're just aging gracefully and naturally. And there's a freedom in that. And when we are free, we free others around us. So we're smashing all of those norms about what aging looks like. and we begin to feel more worthy in our midlife than we have ever felt, possibly ever felt before. And I want this for you because you are more than your wounds, and you are so worthy. You are more than worthy because you are everything. You are absolutely everything. And I can't wait to see everything that you are becoming. So, thank you for joining me on this episode of Beyond the Nudge. I hope you feel inspired, empowered, and ready to take that bold next step into your year of significance. Remember, this is just the beginning. We have so much more to explore together. Be sure to tune into the next episode where we will dive into the myths of self-worth. This was a fun one, so it's one that you won't want to miss. Before we wrap up, I'd love to share two causes close to my heart. I proudly support Women for Women International, an incredible organization empowering women in war-torn countries to rebuild their lives, and Mantle of Hope in Uganda, a charity offering hope and support to the victims of sex trafficking and domestic violence. If you're moved to make a difference, I encourage you to learn more about their transformative work and consider joining me in supporting them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and please share this episode with someone who could use a little nudge of their own. Because remember, your best you is waiting beyond the nudge. Until next time.